Hi everyone, my name is Aaron, and today I want to talk about something very near and dear to my heart. So, as you can probably tell from the title, it is finally releasing my first game after over 2 years of work. So first, I want to apologize for the partially clickbait title, because I have developed games before. This is just the very first one I'm releasing, at least on Steam, and I've only technically been working on it for 2 years. I started it 2 years ago, but I haven't really been working the whole time, so let's call it more like a year. Anyway, here's how I released my very first game after working on it for over 2 years. If we go all the way back to the fall of 2023, I was looking on itch.io and found the Squarespace Speed Jam Fadian edition. So for this game jam, you had to make something that could be speedrun, and it had to be a Fadian game. If you don't know what a Fadian game is, it's something similar to the game Getting Over It with Bennett Foddy, where it's very difficult and inherently rage-inducing, and if you fall, you lose all of your progress. And so the theme of this jam was momentum. Now, at the time, I didn't have enough time to participate in the jam, but I was really inspired by the ideas of combining a Fadian game with the idea of momentum. Now, if you've watched other videos on my channel, you may know that I'm a really big fan of Sebastian Legge, who creates a ton of really cool projects and whose channel is linked in the description. Now, I really liked his video on creating a solar system, specifically simulating gravity. So I really wanted to combine the ideas of a Fadian game with momentum with a gravity simulation that I'd kind of been envisioning in my head for a long time at this point. So I set about creating a prototype or a small game kind of showcasing a gravity simulation. And so, as you can see here, I have the V0.01 earliest build of shoulder-mounted space program. And so at this point, I was still trying to work with the Fadian idea. This is very different from the final product. And the idea was going to be that you would kind of work through a level of 10 or 12 planets and try to visit all of them or get to the last one, and that would be kind of the whole game. It's since evolved to be much more than that, but this is my earliest testing here. There are a few bugs with the gravity system and some of the velocity changing of the player, but in general, a lot of the gameplay mechanics in this mode were kept. I eventually had to kind of step away from the idea of having multiple planets around each other, because as soon as you get past 2 planets, it's kind of insanely hard to predict. Eventually I switched to only having a few at a time unless it was supposed to be a chaotic mode, like one of the ones in the final game that I'll get to. So that's about it for the very first version. Not much to show off, but there was a lot of back-end work that was being done. I believe this scene is still kept in my Unity project, just because I've never really had the heart to delete it. So this is the next oldest version that I have. I wasn't using Unity source control at the time, so I really just have these archived builds that I made for myself. I called it V0.5. I think that was a little ambitious, saying that 49% of the work of the game had been done between here and here. I don't know what I was really thinking at that point, but let's try it out and see what it had. So we now have a menu. So I think there was a save file. I'm not really sure if it edits anything, but you have a play and a quit button, and it has a little bit of the gameplay that I'm now used to. So I've now added in some UI elements that kind of indicate where other planets are, because right now I have no idea, but that doesn't really help. So instead, at this old version, I just allowed the player to zoom out, and eventually I realized that if I allowed the player to zoom out, they would just zoom out the whole time, and they would never really see the details of the game. So this is the kind of basic gameplay of the exploration mode, which is still in the game. So it's one of the main 2 game modes in the game. There are also some early versions of the drone enemies that chase after you and try to shoot rockets at you. Oh, I just got killed by one of the heat-seeking rockets, but I increased my high score to 11, so who really won there? So that's really all that was in this version of the game. It was a little bit more cleaned up. It added some more features and really made this into a functioning game rather than just a Gravity demo. So here I have the last really early version of Shoulder Mounted Space Program. And so I've called it V1.0, and that's because this is the version that I submitted as a class project for my game development class back in college. And so I've also included a README here, and you can tell that this was the class project submission because I never document my code, so I wouldn't have put it there if I didn't have to. So I'll open it up and we can check out this version, what it has to offer. So as you can probably hear, the main thing is the music and sound effects that you'll hear in a second. And so if I go to the credits, which was newly added for this version, I can see that my dad made the original music for it. I can also open up a piece of text to tell you how to play the game. So if we play through the game, you can probably tell that the gameplay hasn't really changed much. I did some polishing and some bug fixes, though there are still a few that later got fixed and will be fixed for the final game. I've now transferred over to Unity, and I started using Unity version control back in about April, so that's the first version that I can show you. But I did work on it for a few months before that in this new version of Shoulder Mounted Space Program. I took about a year off of working on this because I got a full-time job, I graduated from college, and I was working on other projects, so I just didn't really have time for this. But back in around January, I started working on this, and this is the version from around April. And so there are a few issues with the save file. So I used to have a binary formatted save file, but eventually I decided that I wanted to allow users to modify it. So I had to preempt this so that it didn't error out when trying to read an invalid save file. Most of it works as it should, but there are a few issues that I'll talk about in a second. So you get some intro text that is generally unchanged from this version to the current version. And something that I'm really proud of is this interactive main menu, which is still in the current version of the game. So there are two game modes. There's exploration and holdout. And so holdout wasn't implemented in this mode, so I just have this empty planet representing it. Exploration was though, and so it tells you to select a level. And so I go to the travel station, and this button was a little buggy when I first added it. So it now transfers you into the first level, and you can go and play exploration. So the exploration mode doesn't currently work. So if I land on this planet, you can see an error happens and then nothing happens. No other planets generate. And so I believe that's an issue with the save file because it does work in the current version of the game. So, oh yeah, also the transitions don't exactly work in this version. Promise all of these have been fixed since this time. But that's about it for this version of the game. I've now brought us a couple months forward into June, and so I've made a bunch of changes by this point, adding in the holdout mode, and one thing that I was pretty proud of is adding characters to endless mode, or as I now call it, exploration mode. And so in exploration, whenever you land on a planet, there's a chance that you meet a new character, and these characters can either talk to you and then give you a reward in the game's currency, or they can give you a quest. And so they give you a object to find, and then you have to find it generated in the level somewhere, and then bring it back to them when they appear on another planet. And so I created these. So the cow is the first character that you're likely to meet. I think it's a very beautiful piece of pixel art that I made, but I'm also not an artist, so sorry. But I made these using a Unity scriptable object system, which is really interesting. So you create a script that stores a series of data. And so here you have the character sprite, the character name, some dialogue text, and then a few other things dealing with their quest. And then you can just create a new character as easily as going into the create menu and then character object. And then there's another one. I can now go in and start playing this version of the game. So there are a fair amount of things that don't work, but this should give you a pretty decent idea of how the game is supposed to be played at this point in time. So I've now added the holdout mode. So it now tells you that you must select a level before entering. So if we go to the first level, then the transitions finally work now. And you can go into either of them. And I don't believe either of the game modes work at this point because of the same error that we saw in the last one. So as you can see, something similar is happening. I don't really care about debugging it since it's just an old version of the game, and at some point I fixed it. So that's all that I really need to know. I had to do the same fix with the save file, so it resets every single time. So I have to manually select the level again. But if I go into holdout mode, then ideally a bunch of different planets should generate all around this and be very chaotic and hopefully fun, but as I mentioned, it's not really working right now. I brought us to the present day now, or about 3 days ago when the last change was made, and there were a lot of changes made between this version and the previous one that I showed, but they were all small and incremental and only together added up to a larger improvement. So I've deleted my save file, and if I load the game now, it will put me into a new tutorial. After skipping through the text, I can explore some of the tutorial world, and if I go up here, there are some examples of the drone enemies that you might see throughout the game. So they'll follow you around, and you can destroy them and have them scatter debris everywhere. There are also some anti-aircraft guns. And none of these enemies can shoot at you yet. I just wanted to give the player some experience looking at them and possibly dealing with these enemies. After completing the tutorial, you're transported to the main menu. And the main menu is similar but has had a lot of additions and modifications. There's a progress reset planet in case you want to delete your save file and start over. There's also a practice mode where you can play a much more relaxing version of the game where there are no enemies, no oxygen counter, and you have infinite ammo. Again, I have to select a level before playing anything. And afterwards, I can go into exploration or holdout mode. And each of these modes now have their own tutorial, but I don't want to show this in the video, so I'll just skip over those and come back. After skipping over the tutorials, I can go into the real exploration mode and look at it in all of its glory. Because this is the first level, there aren't a ton of enemies, and there's really only one type, and should be able to see it soon. So over here is a cannon that rotates and every 45 degrees just shoots a rocket. And so this was a very intentional choice where I didn't want the first few enemies that you encountered to actively target the player. I wanted it to just cause a lot of chaos in the level that you have to deal with. And so even though they're not targeting me, after a few of them have been generated, it's sometimes difficult to keep track of where all the rockets are and dodge out of their way. In case you want it, there's also a rocket indicators option. I just found that they cluttered the screen up too much sometimes. So these show all of the off-screen rockets, or at least the 10 or so that are closest to you. So for each level, you have to get a certain number of planets visited or a certain amount of time survived in holdout mode in order to advance to the next level. So now we can go over to holdout mode. And the kind of purpose of this mode is to just make everything as chaotic as possible. So there are a ton of planets flying around, there are a ton of enemies, at least there will be once you survive long enough. And so I really like riding the planets around because you can stay on them for as long as you like, or at least until they crash into another planet. There are a few things about the game that I prefer not to spoil completely at this point, But I will say that once you've beaten everything, then there will be a new planet that appears here that allows you to kind of create your own level and decide which enemies and which obstacles you'll face during it. And if I go over to the level select, there may or may not be a boss fight up at the last level once you get to it. It's very challenging but also very fun, at least in my experience, and I hope that a lot of you get to go and see it. So that's my showcase and I guess my pitch for a shoulder-mounted space program. If you have any questions about it, please let me know. The Steam page and the trailer, which I'm really proud of, are both linked in the description. I have a demo for it coming out on October 2nd for Steam Next Fest, so please check that out. I'll post another video whenever that happens. If you have any questions about anything else, including game development or software engineering, I'd be happy to answer them in the comments. Finally, I've also created a Discord channel where people can report bugs or ask questions about the game, and so I've linked that in the description. I would probably be a lot faster to reply on there than on YouTube, so if you want to join, please do. Everybody's welcome. So thank you for watching, and I hope to see you playing Shoulder Mounted Space Program. Thank you.